When you think of the history of modern nations, sometimes a single person becomes the symbol of its creation. For India, that figure is, of course, Mahatma Gandhi. But how did one man, really armed with just an idea, manage to unite a vast and divided subcontinent and challenge the most powerful empire on Earth? Well, we're going to dive into the strategy, the sacrifice, and the genius behind one of history's greatest nation makers.
So picture this. It's 1916. Gandhi's just returned to India after 20 years in South Africa. He's at a university opening, speaking to a room packed with princes, landlords, the absolute elite of society, all dripping in jewels. And he drops this bombshell. He wasn't just giving a speech. He was drawing a line in the sand, right from the very beginning.
But that quote, it wasn't just for shock value. Nope. It was a symptom of a much bigger problem he saw. You see, before Gandhi could offer a cure for India's colonial status, he knew he first had to get the diagnosis right. So what did he do? He didn't lead protests. Instead, he spent his entire first year back home just traveling the country by train, listening and observing, trying to really understand what was wrong with the freedom struggle.
And what he found confirmed his worst fears. The nationalist movement as it existed was what he called an elite phenomenon. It was basically a club for well-educated professionals, lawyers, doctors, landlords, who discussed freedom in English in the big cities. The vast, overwhelming majority of Indians had absolutely no part in it. And this really gets to the heart of his diagnosis. On the one hand, you had the existing movement, this small, exclusive group. But Gandhi's vision was something completely different, something radical. He believed that India's salvation wasn't going to come from a few well-spoken lawyers, but from the millions of farmers out in the villages. He didn't want to just join the club. He wanted to build a movement for everyone. All right, so diagnosis, check. Now it was time for the treatment. Gandhi set out to do something extraordinary, to build a totally new kind of movement, literally from the ground up. This wasn't about making a few changes. It was about tearing up the old playbook and writing a completely new one for the freedom struggle. And his method was just a masterclass in how you build momentum. He started small. In 1917, he went to a place called Champaran and won a real victory for the local farmers. That built trust. Then he scaled it up. In 1919, he launched a nationwide protest against a repressive new law, and suddenly he was a household name. It was only after building that foundation that he made his biggest call yet, a full-blown mass movement of non-cooperation. And the response? It was absolutely staggering. Just look at this one number. In 1921 alone, there were 396 major industrial strikes. The whole machinery of British rule started to grind to a halt. Students walked out of government schools, lawyers boycotted the courts, workers went on strike. I mean, for the first time in a very long time, the British Raj was genuinely shaken. So you have to ask, how did he connect with so many millions of ordinary people? Well, he didn't just talk to them, he became one of them. He ditched the lawyer's suit for a simple loincloth. He made a point of spending part of every single day on the spinning wheel, which was a powerful symbol of self-reliance. He lived simply, he spoke their language. He identified with them so completely that they gave him a new title, Mahatma, which means great soul. And this incredible moral authority, it wasn't just his followers who saw it. Get this, in 1922, Gandhi's on trial for sedition. And the British judge who's about to sentence him to prison says this. I mean, can you imagine? The guy who's about to lock you up is admitting that you're a great patriot and a man of high ideals. It just goes to show that Gandhi was winning the moral argument, even with his enemies. Now, after that big non-cooperation movement, Gandhi actually stepped back from politics for a few years. But by 1930, he was ready for a comeback. And this time, he planned a campaign so simple, so powerful, it would show the world his tactical genius at its absolute peak. It's the ultimate David versus Goliath question, right? How do you stand up to a global superpower that has all the money, all the guns, all the power? What can one person possibly do? His answer was just brilliant. It wasn't a weapon. It was something that every single person in India, rich, poor, Hindu, Muslim, needed and used every single day of their lives. See, here was the thing. The British had a total monopoly on salt. You couldn't just go collect it from the sea. You were forced to buy their heavily taxed salt. It was a law that affected everyone, and everyone hated it. And that made it the absolute perfect symbol for the injustice of British rule. The effect of the Salt March was immediate, and it was global. The whole world was watching.
And you can see the change right here in the pages of America's Time magazine. Before the march, they were kind of mocking his appearance, but afterward, whoa, the tone changes completely. Now he's a saint and a statesman, a man who made the entire British Empire desperately anxious.
The Salt March was such a massive success that it forced the British to the negotiating table. But a funny thing happens when freedom starts to feel real. All the deep divisions that had been simmering under the surface of Indian society, between different castes, different religions, they started to boil over, threatening to tear the whole movement apart.
And one of the biggest fault lines was this fierce debate between Gandhi and B.R. Ambedkar, who was a brilliant leader for India's lowest castes. Gandhi believed that giving them a separate vote would permanently divide them from the rest of Hindu society. But Ambedkar argued it was absolutely necessary for a community that had been systematically oppressed for centuries. This wasn't a small disagreement. It was about the very soul of what a free India would look like. And that conflict was really a sign of the bigger storm that was gathering. Throughout the 1940s, that dream of a single, united India began to fracture. The demands for a separate Muslim state grew louder. The British tried to keep the country together, but they failed. And then came the breaking point in 1946, when a call for direct action exploded into horrific violence. It became tragically clear that the path to freedom was going to be a bloody one.
So as his lifelong dream of a united India is literally going up in flames, Gandhi enters the final, tragic chapter of his life. And it's here, in the middle of all this chaos, that his biographer says we witness his finest hour, a time of almost unbelievable personal courage.
And then the day finally comes. August 15, 1947. After decades and decades of struggle, India finally achieves its independence. It was a moment of just incredible joy and celebration across the new nation.
So where was Gandhi, the father of the nation? You'd think he'd be in Delhi, right at the center of the celebrations, taking a well-deserved victory lap. But he wasn't there. He was nowhere to be found. He was in Calcutta, a city that had been torn apart by the violence between Hindus and Muslims. Because for Gandhi, freedom that came with the country being divided and his people killing each other, that wasn't a victory at all. He called it an unacceptable price. So instead of celebrating, he spent the day fasting.
He kept pleading for peace, right up to the very end. But just a few months later, on January 30th, 1948, during his evening prayer meeting, Gandhi was shot and killed. His assassin was a Hindu extremist who hated his message of tolerance and saw him as an appeaser of Muslims.
His death sent a shockwave around the entire planet, and that same Time magazine that once mocked him now compared his assassination to Abraham Lincoln's. The world knew it had lost another great unifier, a man killed because he believed in peace and reconciliation.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really difficult question. Gandhi achieved the impossible. He mobilized a nation and brought an empire to its knees. And yet he failed to prevent the one thing he dreaded most, the division of his country. A failure that ultimately cost him his life. It forces us to ask, what does that tell us about the limits of leadership, of nonviolence, and of even the most powerful ideas in the face of history?